Gunshots echoed like thunder through the moonlit streets, shattering the fragile silence of a city, hiding its sins beneath polished marble and glittering glass. Amid shattered windows and panicked cries, a single file folder slipped from trembling fingers, scattering secrets like ashes in the wind. This was never meant to happen, not here, not now. But buried beneath manicured lawns and charity galas lay a darkness deeper than greed, colder than betrayal. It whispered through mortgage papers signed in desperation, through eviction notices inked in cruelty. Tonight, the mask is torn away. Tonight, powerful men will confront the wreckage they've wrought. Justice may burn slow, but when ignited, it spares no soul. And as sirens wail and the last illusions collapse, one truth remains clear: no empire built on suffering stands forever. Nora Daniels never expected to set foot in the Winthrop family's ancestral estate again. Not after the cruel whispers and the unforgettable humiliation she had endured at their centennial celebration. Yet here she was, stepping onto the polished marble floors of Magnolia Hall, feeling the same tense undercurrent in the air that had haunted her 3 years ago. The looming portraits of generations past seemed to stare down at her with disapproval. She forced herself to keep her chin up, shoulders squared, reminding herself of the soldier's training she had once relied on to face adversity head-on. In her 36 years, Nora had seen her share of conflict first in the Detroit neighborhood where she grew up, then in the Army's logistics unit overseas, and finally in the cutthroat realm of corporate finance. None of it compared to the covert battles she had fought against the Winthrops. She had met Marcus Winthrop when she was 29 and working as a junior accountant at a mid-level firm in Atlanta. He'd strolled in one afternoon, all Southern charm and an earnest smile that disarmed her. She was skeptical of men who came from old money she'd been burned once before, and her family had lost everything to a predatory lender. But Marcus had seemed different. He respected her intelligence, admired her resilience. Over time, she realized he was deeply ashamed of some of his family's business dealings, particularly those orchestrated by his mother, Eleanor, and his younger brother, Braden. The Winthrops owned an investment conglomerate with a century-long legacy in Georgia Winthrop Financial, and they prided themselves on tradition, appearances, and a carefully curated image of Southern gentility. Nora's first introduction to Eleanor Winthrop had been a study in polite hostility. The older woman had smiled with perfect white teeth and extended a hand heavy with jeweled rings. But her eyes conveyed a chilling message: you are not one of us. It didn't matter that Nora was a decorated Army veteran or that she had put herself through college at night while supporting her younger sister. What mattered was that she came from a rough part of Detroit, had no familial connections in high society, and carried a lifetime of scars from economic injustice. Still, Marcus had proposed, and Nora had accepted, believing that love could bridge the chasm between her reality and the rarefied world of the Winthrops. She had been wrong, at least about the family. They never fully accepted her, and she tried not to let it break her spirit. Over time, she channeled the sting of their rejection into a dream, a financial platform that would empower people from disadvantaged backgrounds to navigate banking, loans, and investments without getting crushed by hidden fees and manipulative fine print. She named her fledgling startup Clear Vista, and for 2 years, she worked on it in secret, refining its algorithms late into the night. Marcus, supportive as ever, helped her financially, though in private to avoid further conflict with his mother. But on the night of the Centennial Gala, when her laptop was tampered with and the mocking insinuations reached new depths, Nora finally reached her breaking point. She resolved then and there to strike back. Tonight's event was billed as the Winthrop Financial 103rd Anniversary Celebration, a scaled-down version of the Grand Centennial Gala from 3 years prior. The estate, known as Magnolia Hall, was draped in thousands of tiny fairy lights. Strings of them hung from centuries-old oaks, casting a golden glow across the manicured lawn. Nora stepped out of the black SUV Marcus had rented, smoothing down the skirt of her navy blue dress. Though her heartbeat pounded in her ears, her face remained impassive. She had come prepared this time. She wasn't some naive outsider hoping for acceptance. This time, she had a plan. Marcus, walking beside her, looked tense. He wore a tailored suit in charcoal gray and carried himself with the practiced ease of a man who had attended society functions his whole life. But Nora knew him well enough to sense the storm beneath. Over the past 3 years, he had uncovered the full extent of his family's financial misdeeds. Quiet investigations, late-night phone calls, and silent collaborations with old contacts from his short-lived government stint had yielded an archive of incriminating documents. Documents that proved how Winthrop Financial and its ally, Preston Finance, had systematically profited from targeted foreclosures in minority neighborhoods. Documents that also suggested involvement in laundering money through shell accounts. Marcus, never comfortable with the family empire's direction, now found himself in direct moral opposition to everything his mother and brother stood for. As they crossed the threshold into Magnolia Hall, Nora felt every gaze on her dozens of rich guests, clad in black tie and designer gowns, heads turning to assess the new arrival. She recognized some of them minor politicians, local business magnates, old money families who had looked at her with disdain before. A hush fell briefly, then hushed conversations resumed, laced with curiosity. After all, rumor had it that Nora Daniels was something of a revolutionary in the finance world. She'd secured a major injection of venture capital for her startup, Clear Vista, and was rumored to be close to launching a game-changing new platform. But more salacious were the rumors of her estrangement from the Winthrops, a gentler way of saying the family had tried to sabotage her project and ostracize her from polite society. Marcus squeezed her hand reassuringly. They moved through the crowd, offering nods and polite smiles. Then, like a vulture circling its prey, Eleanor Winthrop appeared. She was a slender woman with impeccably styled silver hair and a posture that screamed aristocracy. Each step in her high heels was decisive, meant to establish dominance on her home turf. She wore a sequined black gown, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrist. Her lips curved into something that resembled a welcome. But Nora knew better. "Nora, darling," Eleanor said, emphasizing each syllable. "It's been so long. We didn't expect you this evening." Her eyes darted to the small clutch Nora held, as if searching for hidden devices or perhaps evidence of infiltration. Behind Eleanor stood Braden Winthrop, younger by 5 years than Marcus, smirking as though he already knew tonight's outcome and found it amusing. Nora's pulse hammered, but she kept her composure, recalling the vow she'd made 3 years ago, "I will not cower again." Before Eleanor could launch another polished insult disguised as politeness, the hostess for the night, an event planner from Charleston, swept in to announce that the festivities were moving to the grand ballroom. The crowd drifted away, leaving Nora, Marcus, and the two Winthrops in a silent standoff near a gilded mirror. Eleanor's critical gaze took in Nora's dress, the single silver chain around her neck, her neatly braided hair pinned in a sleek bun. Then she flicked her eyes to Marcus, as if to say, "Is she still your wife, Mother?" Marcus began, voice stiffer than usual. "Thank you for inviting us." He made no move to hug her. "We appreciate the chance to reconnect after so long." Eleanor pursed her lips. "We didn't expect you both, but of course, you're always welcome." She directed a lingering look at Nora that dripped with irony. This is your home, after all. Nora fought the urge to remind Eleanor that home should feel safe, that she had never once felt at home within these walls. But she bit her tongue. She had bigger objectives tonight than trading barbs. Braden shifted his stance, giving Nora a once-over as he adjusted the cuffs of his designer tux. Heard you've been busy. Nora, something about a new software launch. Seems like a lot of fuss for a side project. Are you sure you're ready for the big leagues? Her jaw tightened at his condescension. Despite his polished exterior dark hair, striking cheekbones, Braden Winthrop was a venomous operator behind the scenes. It was his doing that had led to her files being copied 3 years ago. That stolen code had shown up in a competitor's product mere weeks before Clear Vista's beta release. She had scrambled to protect her intellectual property, but the damage was done. Some of her earliest ideas were compromised, overshadowing her triumphant raise of initial seed money. I'm more than ready, Nora replied coolly. You'd be surprised what someone can accomplish with the right determination. Before the tension could escalate, Eleanor gave a short laugh, brittle as cracked ice. Darling, let's not sour the evening with business talk. It's a celebration. After all, we have a lovely dinner planned and some wonderful announcements about Winthrop Financial's philanthropic work. Perhaps you'll find it educational. Marcus shot Nora a warning glance. She nodded imperceptibly. Pushing confrontation right now might derail everything they'd prepared for. They needed to blend in, observe, and wait for the perfect moment to strike. And they would strike because Nora had arrived armed not just with polite words, but with evidence that could burn the Winthrop empire to the ground if need be. They followed Eleanor and Braden into the grand ballroom. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting off the mirrored walls in bursts of gold. Soft classical music wafted through hidden speakers. An enormous portrait of the late patriarch, Winston Winthrop, dominated one wall. His painted gaze seemed to watch them step by step, as if daring Nora to defile the sanctity of this family legacy. She inhaled slowly, recalling her training. Assess, analyze, act. Tonight, she vowed, I won't be the same woman who walked away 3 years ago in shame. While servers glided among the guests, offering champagne flutes and canapes, Nora allowed herself to scan the room for potential allies or threats. This was a skill she'd honed in the military. Never stand with your back to a hostile environment. Never assume safety in a crowd. Her eyes landed on a tall figure in a dark suit lurking near a side door. This man, with cropped hair and an earpiece, seemed out of place among the glittering aristocrats. Winthrop's personal security, perhaps possibly the same type who had rifled through her belongings last time. Marcus pointed out a few acquaintances he recognized: local officials, a retired senator, a real estate mogul from Florida. Their presence hinted at the network the Winthrops held in their pocket. But Nora was hunting for one face in particular, Gerald Fry, the ex-corporate lawyer who'd quietly tipped her off about irregularities in Winthrop Financial's mortgage dealings. If Gerald was here tonight, it could mean he was still working both sides, feeding the Winthrops the illusion of loyalty while passing intelligence to her. She prayed he hadn't been discovered. The crowd thickened as they approached a grand buffet table lined with silver chafing dishes. Gleaming platters of roast duck, carved beef, and shrimp cocktails radiated the family's opulence. Eleanor had spared no expense, though it seemed ironically timed in an era of economic uncertainty. For Nora, the display only underscored the gulf between the Winthrops and the communities she wanted to serve with Clear Vista people who lived paycheck to paycheck, victims of adjustable rate mortgages and hidden fees. She felt a tug at her elbow and turned to see Marcus's father, Walter Winthrop, stepping forward with a practiced politician's smile. She hadn't spotted him earlier. He must have slipped in from the library or some private study. Walter was older, mid-70s, with thinning hair combed neatly back, a regal bearing that matched his wife's. But unlike Eleanor's cold veneer, Walter's eyes showed a flicker of warmth, an ember of paternal care that had once made Nora believe he might be different from the rest. "Nora," he said in a voice hushed yet firm. "Marcus, I'm glad you could make it. I was hoping we could find a moment to talk." She glanced sideways at Marcus. They had discussed the possibility that Walter might try a conciliatory approach, perhaps to coax them into dropping any investigations or public revelations. Nora had strong suspicions that Walter was the one orchestrating the more dangerous financial plays behind the scenes, using Braden and Eleanor as the face. If so, then his outward kindness might be the most perilous mask of all. "Of course," Marcus replied. "We'd welcome a chance to catch up." His tone suggested the opposite. Nora braced herself for a subtle interrogation, or worse. She remembered the two suits in the corner by the side door. If things went south, security would be there in seconds. Walter led them through a side passage into a small antechamber, richly decorated with antique furniture and a portrait of Magnolia Hall as it stood a century ago. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Nora's heart thumped. She was ready for whatever game the patriarch intended to play. Once inside the antechamber, Walter gestured for them to sit on a velvet-cushioned love seat beside an ornate fireplace. He eased into a wing-back chair facing them. The flames cast flickering shadows across his lined face, emphasizing every crease of worry or regret. Nora briefly imagined him as a kind-hearted grandfather, telling old war stories to children at Christmas. But that illusion broke the moment he spoke. "I've heard quite a bit about Clear Vista in recent months." "Nora," Walter began, leaning forward, hands clasped. "Investors are buzzing that you're about to release a new platform that could shift how underprivileged communities handle finances. That's quite a leap from your last demonstration." Nora caught the slightest edge in his tone. He wasn't here to congratulate her. He wanted information. "I can't confirm or deny rumors," she said calmly, "but I'm proud of our progress. We aim to level the playing field." Marcus rested a hand on Nora's shoulder, a protective gesture. "Father, if this is about your attempts to partner with Clear Vista, we already discussed it. Nora and I want to keep her startup independent." The subtext was clear. "We won't become a puppet of Winthrop Financial." Walter nodded thoughtfully. "Independence can be admirable, especially for a veteran like Nora. But everything has a cost. Investors might want to see a certain level of experience at the helm. You and your mother," he paused, corrects himself. "Your mother and I, we want to ensure that the best guidance is there. We could offer that guidance." Nora bristled. The implication that she lacked experience was the same subtle belittlement she'd faced all her life. "I appreciate the concern, but I think we'll manage just fine. I learned quite a bit about logistics and leadership in the Army, and even more while rebuilding my family's finances after the mortgage crisis. Let's just say I'm not easily rattled." Walter studied her for a long moment, the silence thick in the musty air. Finally, he exhaled. "Then I'll be straightforward. We've received some surprising data that suggests your mother, God rest her soul, defaulted on a mortgage financed by a subsidiary connected to Winthrop years ago. There's a chance the details could come to light, and it might complicate the narrative you're presenting to your investors and the public." The words dropped like stones. Nora's mind reeled. The loss of her family home in Detroit had been devastating, but she never knew Winthrop's involvement. She wondered if the contract she and her mother had signed was already rigged to fail from the start. Her stomach turned. Marcus's voice rose. "Father, you're not threatening Nora with her own tragic past. That was a predatory scheme that forced thousands of families into foreclosure. You can't possibly think we'd stand by while you leveraged that Walter spread his hands, face arranged in an expression of regretful practicality. I'm telling you so we can address it discreetly. If the press learns Nora's mother was in default under a Winthrop-linked loan, they might spin it into a scandal for Clear Vista. I'm offering a way to avoid that. Nora's eyes burned. She stood abruptly, the soft cushions giving way under her weight. "You're offering a cover-up in exchange for my compliance," she said evenly, her voice trembling with indignation. "My mother died believing she'd failed us. All along, it was your system that bled her dry." Before Walter could respond, the door clicked open and Braden swept in, coolly ignoring the tension as if he had every right to intrude. He carried a tumbler of amber whiskey and leaned against the doorframe, smirking at Nora with insufferable ease. "Looks like the family meeting started without me," he quipped. "Father, you really must remember to invite all stakeholders when discussing such delicate matters." Nora felt the hackles rise on her neck. Stakeholders, that was precisely how they saw her. A piece of property to be negotiated, a variable in a deal. She flicked her gaze at Marcus. He looked ready to explode, fists clenched at his sides. Walter cleared his throat, regaining composure. "Braden, we were just discussing how best to manage the little scandal." "Yes?" Braden interjected, taking a swig of whiskey. "Diason, we can't have your mother's old mortgage fiasco muddying the waters for Clear Vista. Can we? I mean, it would be a shame if the public discovered that Nora's fight against predatory lending was born from her own family's inability to handle finances responsibly. How ironic would that be?" Nora breathed slowly, counting to 5. She recalled her training in crisis negotiation. "Stay calm. Never let them see you sweat. You're turning a real tragedy into a ploy," she said, voice steady. "But you're underestimating how prepared I am." Braden raised an eyebrow. "Oh, are we?" In that instant, Marcus stepped forward, face stern. "Enough. We won't be blackmailed. If you think you can bury the truth about your own wrongdoing because we have those documents, and you know it, then you're mistaken. We have emails, internal memos, everything that ties Winthrop Financial to unethical foreclosure practices. So back off." A heavy silence followed. Walter's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger clouding his eyes. Braden maintained his smirk, but his grip on the glass visibly tightened. Nora realized they had struck a nerve. The Winthrops did not appreciate losing control. Walter looked at his son, then at Nora, weighing his options. "This conversation is becoming unproductive. Maybe we should return to the ballroom. There's still a celebration going on. After all." Marcus's lips pressed thin, but he nodded curtly. Nora allowed herself a final glare at Braden before turning away. She was certain the Winthrops wouldn't give up so easily. This was just a preliminary skirmish. Yet, if they wanted a war, she was ready to give them one. They emerged into the bustling corridor leading back to the ballroom. Waiters navigated trays of champagne, while guests milled around discussing business or politics. Nora couldn't help but feel the disparity between the estate's grandeur and the moral rot it concealed. She prayed her next move would expose that rot once and for all. But first, she needed to confirm that her ally Gerald Fry was still in play. If he had vital files or was willing to testify, then she'd have the final puzzle pieces to fully dismantle the Winthrops' facade. As if on cue, a discreet text buzzed on her phone. "In the library. Need to talk." She recognized the number. Gerald was summoning her. Nora caught Marcus's eye, gave a small nod, and they slipped off amid the swirl of gowns and tuxedos, leaving Walter and Braden behind in the antechamber to stew in their threat-laced ultimatum. The Winthrop Library was nestled in a quiet wing of Magnolia Hall, away from the grand festivities. It smelled of polished mahogany, aged leather, and the faint mustiness of old books no one had bothered to read in decades. Nora and Marcus moved soundlessly along the hallway, their footsteps muffled by an ornate runner rug. They paused outside the tall double doors, half expecting a guard or eavesdropper. Finding none, Marcus pushed the door open. Inside, Gerald Fry stood by a curved oak desk, leafing through a thick binder. He was a wiry man in his late 50s, sporting a neatly trimmed beard and the weary look of someone who'd spent a lifetime mired in legal bureaucracy. When he spotted Nora, he offered a nervous smile. "You made it," he said, voice hushed as though the walls themselves had ears. "I was worried they might intercept you." Nora closed the door behind them. They tried. "We just had a little chat with Walter and Braden." She gave a quick recap of the threat about her mother's mortgage. Gerald shook his head, remorse etched into his features. "I figured it might come to that," Gerald replied, tapping the binder. "They've been rummaging through old archives, looking for leverage. But that's not all. There's a bigger issue you need to see. I say." He beckoned them closer and flipped open the binder to reveal pages of data, legal references, and transaction logs. "This is from a special project Winthrop Financial handled back in 2008 through 2012 foreclosures. Short sales, reverse mortgages, mostly targeting low-income minority homeowners. Let's just say the federal authorities would have a field day if they got these files." Marcus skimmed a page, his eyes narrowing. They orchestrated defaults by adjusting interest rates once borrowers were locked in. Then they flipped the properties at auctions to shell companies. That's how they built half their real estate portfolio in the South. Gerald nodded gravely. "It gets worse." Preston Finance, an ally of the Winthrops, picked up a large share of those repossessed properties at bargain prices. The two companies effectively colluded to drive families into foreclosure, profit from the losses, and then resell at huge markups. If you show this to the right people, investigative journalists, maybe a federal task force, Winthrop Financial, could face massive penalties, possibly indictments. Nora's breath caught. She thought about all the families like hers, who had lost homes in the aftermath of the recession, the heartbreak, the hopelessness, the generational damage. Anger coursed through her veins. She closed her eyes for a moment to steady herself. "We need to bring this to light, but we have to do it carefully. If we leak it without proof that it's legitimate, they'll bury us in legal suits. We need a bulletproof approach, maybe a press conference once Clear Vista's new platform is launched." Marcus glanced at Gerald. "Thank you for your courage in sharing this. Are you safe?" If the Winthrops suspect Gerald looked exhausted, "I'm fine for now, but I can't stay here much longer. They've got private security watching staff movements. I copied these files from a locked server. If they find out, I could lose more than my job." His voice trembled slightly, revealing genuine fear. Nora placed a hand on his arm. "We'll keep you anonymous. Clear Vista's legal team will protect you." "Thank you, Gerald. Your testimony might be the tipping point we need." As if to punctuate her statement, a loud burst of laughter from the hallway seeped through the door. The world outside kept spinning in its glamorous bubble, but inside this hushed library, they held the seeds of the Winthrops' downfall. Nora gently closed the binder, her resolve growing stronger by the second. "It's time to even the scales," she thought, exiting the library with the binder carefully tucked in a discreet bag. Nora and Marcus navigated back toward the ballroom, hearts pounding with anticipation. Even as the music swelled from an orchestra near the stage, the tension in the corridors felt like a thundercloud on the verge of breaking. The entire mansion seemed to hold its breath, awaiting confrontation. They re-entered the main hall to find a hush settling over the crowd. At the front of the room, on a raised dais, stood Eleanor Winthrop, flanked by Walter on one side and Braden on the other. Eleanor was tapping on the microphone stand, testing it with a delicate tap-tap that echoed through the suddenly attentive audience. Ladies and gentlemen, she began with her trademark graciousness. Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate another milestone for Winthrop Financial. We've served our community for over a century, weathering wars, recessions, and societal shifts. Yet we remain. Nora tuned out for a moment, scanning the edges of the crowd. She spotted the security personnel she'd seen earlier, joined by a couple more in matching dark suits. They stood like statues, eyes flicking around for any sign of disturbance. She guessed the family had some plan to keep unruly elements in check, namely her. Eleanor continued, "In these changing times, our legacy is stronger than ever, and I'm proud to announce tonight a new philanthropic initiative that will further the Winthrop tradition of giving back. We are launching the Winthrop Foundation for Responsible Home Ownership." Marcus inhaled sharply. Nora's stomach dropped. Responsible home ownership. It sounded like the same old spin, a veneer of kindness masking predatory practices. More importantly, it could be a way to redirect attention from what they'd truly done, forcibly taking homes from vulnerable families. She glanced at Marcus. He gave a small nod, as if asking, "Should we expose them now?" But Nora hesitated. The information in the binder needed context. Releasing it in a chaotic forum like this might muddy the impact. She thought of the press, the public, the people who needed to see the truth unfiltered. She shook her head slightly. Not yet. The right time was crucial. A misguided reveal could backfire. Eleanor flashed a triumphant smile. This foundation will help prospective homeowners gain financial education so they can avoid risky decisions. Together, we'll ensure families remain safe and stable under Winthrop's caring guidance. Applause rippled through the crowd. Many onlookers, ignorant of the hypocrisy, likely found this news commendable. Unable to restrain himself, Marcus cleared his throat loudly, stepping forward. "Mother, that's quite an announcement, but it's interesting timing, wouldn't you say?" "Nora." His voice carried across the ballroom, drawing heads toward them. Eleanor's expression froze. Walter shot his son a warning glare. Braden's jaw tightened. The tension skyrocketed. Whispers spread among the guests. "What's happening?" Nora steeled herself, mindful that confrontation in this environment was exactly what the Winthrops might want to corner her in front of an audience. Still, she couldn't remain silent. "Indeed, fascinating timing," she said evenly, "especially considering how many families were hurt by certain lending practices." She let the statement linger, not naming names yet, but enough to sow doubt. Eleanor maintained her composure. "Ah, Nora, dear, I know your passion for helping the less fortunate. Perhaps, in the spirit of unity, we can merge your new software with our foundation's efforts. A partnership might do wonders for the community." That was her trap. Nora realized an offer to bring Clear Vista under Winthrop's banner, effectively controlling it. She felt the eyes of the entire hall upon her. Tension coiled. She had the binder, the files, but she needed the right moment to show them. Soon, she promised herself. Soon. Nora was spared from having to reply immediately by an unexpected commotion near the French doors leading to the garden. Through the shifting crowd, she saw a female guest in a sleek silver gown burst in, half out of breath, frantically whispering to someone. Security guards hurried to intercept her, but she waved them off and made her way across the polished floor, heading straight for the dais. Eleanor frowned, holding the microphone in mid-air. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said curtly, her hostess veneer slipping. Could you kindly wait until after the remarks? The woman, possibly in her late 40s, had an air of desperate urgency that sliced through the ball's cultivated elegance. I'm sorry, she stammered. I was told I could find help here. I'm losing my home tomorrow if I can't come up with the money, and Winthrop Financial is behind. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Nora's heart lurched. This woman was living the nightmare that Nora's mother had once endured, a forcibly scheduled eviction, no doubt orchestrated by Winthrop's labyrinth of subsidiaries. The edges of Nora's vision glowed red with anger. Eleanor's eyes widened in alarm. Oh, dear, that's most unfortunate, but this is a private event. If you have concerns about a foreclosure, you should speak with our offices on Monday. The woman's desperation spilled over. Your offices won't see me. They locked me out and said I'm too late. I had nowhere else to go. I don't want to cause a scene, but my children. Her voice broke, tears brimming. I'm a single mom. I came here hoping for mercy. Murmurs spread. Some guests seemed scandalized. Others looked touched by the woman's plight. Marcus exhaled slowly, fists clenched at his side. Nora felt tears prick her own eyes, recalling how her mother had pleaded with faceless loan officers to no avail. She advanced toward the dais. Braden, scowling, muttered something to a security guard who tried to guide the woman away. Nora's soldier instincts kicked in. She swiftly maneuvered through the crowd and blocked the guard's path. Wait, she commanded, turning to the woman. Ma'am, I'm Nora Daniels. I have some experience with the kind of mortgage you might be dealing with. Can you tell me who your lender is? The woman clutched her purse, rummaging for a letter. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a foreclosure notice. Nora scanned the letter Augusta Mortgage and Loan, a shell company she recognized from Gerald's binder. They specialized in subprime deals for desperate clients, eventually flipping homes back to Winthrop at huge profit. Her blood boiled. Eleanor tried to regain control of the microphone. This truly isn't the time or place. Madam, please, if you'd step outside. But Nora raised her voice, letting it carry through the hall. This is exactly the time and place. You just announced a philanthropic foundation aimed at responsible home ownership. Let's see how responsibly you handle this woman's crisis right now. Are you going to help her keep her home or cast her aside for profit? A stunned hush fell. The tension was palpable. Cameras from curious guests started flashing. Eleanor glanced at Walter, panic flickering across her face. Braden took a step forward, but Marcus slipped between them, blocking his brother. This was turning into a spectacle the Winthrops had not foreseen. And for Nora, it felt like the start of the reckoning she'd waited for. Enough Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip through the hush, resonating off the marble floors and mirrored walls. She set the microphone aside, clearly aware that every word was being recorded by the throng of onlookers. We will, of course, address any urgent matter privately. Now, security, please escort this lady to a waiting area where we can speak calmly. Her tone left no room for dissent. The woman sobbed, uncertain, clutching her notice like a lifeline. Nora gently touched her arm, meeting her teary gaze. Go with them. I promise I'll make sure your case is heard. She offered a reassuring smile, though her anger simmered beneath. Once security guided the distressed mother away, Eleanor returned to the microphone, composure reasserted. My apologies for the interruption. We believe in helping those in need, but we must do so through proper channels. Now, I would like to propose a toast. She paused to pick up a crystal flute from the table behind her. Walter and Braden followed suit, to the enduring legacy of Winthrop Financial and to a future where every family can find a safe, secure home. Nora exchanged a glance with Marcus. The hypocrisy was suffocating. A polite smattering of applause rippled through the guests. Some clearly just wanted to revert to the evening's planned scheduled dinner. Speeches, dancing anything to avoid the raw discomfort of real life intruding on a gilded bubble. Just then, a staff member approached the dais, whispering something to Eleanor, who nodded gravely. The staffer then crossed to Nora and Marcus with the same message. Miss Daniels, Mr. Winthrop. Miss Winthrop requests your presence in the blue drawing room immediately. She asks that you bring no one else. Marcus bristled. Tell her we'll come as soon as we've... The staffer shook his head, face pale. Ma'am, sir, she insisted right away, or she'll have you removed from the premises. He glanced around nervously, as though at any moment a swarm of guards might converge. Nora grit her teeth. She suspected a confrontation was inevitable. She turned to Marcus. Let's not cause more of a scene out here. Let's hear what they have to say. She didn't like the idea of walking into a room alone with that triumvirate of Winthrop power, but she knew they had to finish what they started. They followed the staffer down a dimly lit corridor that branched off from the main hall. The plush carpet swallowed their footsteps, and the walls were lined with portraits of Winthrop ancestors. Each painting seemed to glare at Nora, as if to say, "You don't belong here." At the end, the staffer pushed open a set of tall double doors to reveal the blue drawing room, a high-ceilinged chamber adorned with royal blue drapes, antique furnishings, and a massive carved fireplace. Inside waited Eleanor, Walter, and Braden. The door clicked shut behind Nora and Marcus, sealing them in. Eleanor remained standing, arms folded. Braden swirled a glass of whiskey in his hand, leaning against an ornate side table. Walter stood near the fireplace, gaze fixed on the flames. Eleanor gestured for them to approach. We've indulged enough theatrics for one night. Nora, she snapped, if you have some vendetta you wish to prosecute, be forewarned that we will not tolerate sabotage in our own home. Nora stepped forward, carefully placing her small bag on a nearby chair. The binder inside felt like a ticking bomb. If this confrontation escalated, she might have to detonate it right here and now. Nan sayo. Beside her, Marcus squared his shoulders, refusing to give any sign of intimidation. You've left us no choice but to speak plainly. Mrs. Winthrop, Nora said, you threatened to expose my mother's foreclosure history. You orchestrated a spectacle in that ballroom, announcing a foundation that's nothing more than a cover for your unethical practices, and your companies, including Augusta Mortgage and Loan, are about to evict a desperate mother tomorrow morning. You call my concerns theatrics. This entire charade is yours. Eleanor's lips thinned. She glanced at Braden. See, this is the disrespect I warned you about. She believes she can march in and dismantle a century of business protocol with some bleeding heart sob stories. Walter cleared his throat. Careful, Eleanor, we don't want to escalate. His tone was conciliatory, but his eyes were cold. Then he turned to Nora. What exactly do you want reassurance that we'll handle that woman's case? Fine. We'll postpone her eviction, pending review. He said it like one might toss table scraps to a dog. Nora refused to back down. I want systemic change. I have documents, she tapped the bag, ensuring they noticed. That proved Winthrop Financial and Preston Finance colluded to prey on vulnerable homeowners, flipping properties for profit. If those come to light, your philanthropic foundation will look like a cruel joke. Braden clicked his tongue. Ah, yes, the elusive documents. Forgive me for doubting their validity. Perhaps you've been misled by disgruntled employees or forged data. You're playing a dangerous game. Nora, he took a slow sip of whiskey, eyes locked on her with predatory intensity. Marcus couldn't contain himself. Stop. We both know the documents are real. We have internal memos with your signatures. Braden, implicating you in strategic foreclosure acquisitions. Don't stand there and pretend innocence. Eleanor's nostrils flared. Signatures can be doctored. Emails can be falsified. You can't possibly think any court would take such evidence at face value. Nora inhaled, bracing for the final blow. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded affidavit. This, she said, voice steady, is a sworn statement from Gerald Fry, your former corporate counsel. He testifies that the data was taken directly from Winthrop's servers. He has the encryption keys to prove authenticity. Combine that with the pattern of families driven into default under your manipulated interest rates, and we have a bulletproof case for federal fraud charges. So, yes, courts would care, the media would care, and ironically, your philanthropic donors would care too. A hush followed her words. The only sound was the faint crackle of the fireplace. Braden's smirk faded, replaced by a hardened scowl. Walter pressed his lips together, eyes narrowing. Eleanor's glare burned with haughty defiance. For a few seconds, no one moved, as though awaiting the next shot in a standoff. Eleanor finally broke the silence, voice low. And I suppose you believe exposing us will magically fix these problems you claim to champion. You'll tear down a legacy that's provided jobs, built hospitals, funded charities for what, a quest to punish us? Nora felt a rush of heated emotion, but kept it contained. Not punish, she replied. Reform. Because behind every grand gesture of charity you fund, there's a hidden ledger of exploitation. It's time the world saw the truth. Walter paced toward the fireplace, hands behind his back. He inhaled as if preparing for a carefully rehearsed monologue. You speak of truth and reform, but you don't grasp the complexities of old money, nor the role we play in stabilizing economic cycles. Sometimes we must make hard decisions, foreclosures, liquidations to keep the broader system afloat. Nyan. You, with your heroic narrative of fighting injustice, would disrupt the delicate balance that keeps communities functioning. Nora stared at him, incredulous. Foreclosing on families who already struggle to pay rent isn't stabilizing anything. It's funneling wealth to the top while entire neighborhoods collapse. If that's your delicate balance, I want no part in it. Eleanor shot a look at Marcus. Son, you've dragged your wife into a pit of illusions. Our businesses, for all their flaws, have lifted entire regions out of poverty, provided thousands of jobs. He cut in, voice tight with anger. Then why do you hide your methods? Why bribe local officials, push families to the brink, and pocket the difference? If you were as noble as you claim, you wouldn't fear Nora's evidence. His tone faltered slightly, revealing his own heartbreak that his family could be so morally bankrupt. Braden, clearly itching for a fight, threw his empty glass onto a nearby sideboard with a crash. This is pointless. Let's skip the moral sermon. Bottom line, if you go public, we'll bury you in lawsuits. We'll tie up Clear Vista in legal battles for years, freeze your assets, and brand you as a disgruntled gold digger. Meanwhile, we'll spin our own version. Our philanthropic record will overshadow your allegations, and the public will move on to the next scandal. Nora forced herself to remain calm. Every muscle in her body screamed to lash out, but she knew that anger was what they wanted, an emotional meltdown they could use against her. She took a measured breath. You're underestimating the power of real stories from real people like the mother you tried to throw out tonight. Multiply that by the thousands of families across Georgia you've wronged. Think they'll side with you after hearing the proof. Eleanor's voice cracked like ice. You're naive if you think the media cares more about average families than about sensational headlines or corporate PR. Money can buy silence. Always has, always will. A tingle of dread ran up Nora's spine. She knew they had a point. The Winthrops had the resources to hire the best lawyers, the best crisis management teams, and to manipulate narratives. Even if she had truth on her side, winning in the court of public opinion wasn't guaranteed. Still, she refused to yield. Marcus stepped closer to Nora. She felt his support, his resolve. "We're prepared for your counterattacks," he said. "We've been working with nonprofit legal groups, civil rights organizations, and investigative journalists. We won't be alone in this. By the time we go public, the question won't be whether you're guilty, but how high up the blame goes." Walter whirled around from the fireplace, his expression stormy. "I see. So that's the path you choose, burning bridges, humiliating your own family. Remember, Marcus, once this starts, there's no going back." The standoff was interrupted by the sudden intrusion of a security guard. He cracked open the drawing room door and cleared his throat. "Apologies, Mr. Winthrop, ma'am. There's a situation in the courtyard. Some guests have begun protesting outside, claiming they were invited to speak with Miss Daniels regarding mortgage fraud. It's causing quite a disturbance." Eleanor's glare snapped to Nora. "How dare you invite outsiders here?" Nora raised her hands in disbelief. "I didn't invite anyone, but I'm not surprised people have shown up. Word travels fast, especially when folks are desperate and hear that Winthrop Financial is hosting a big celebration. Maybe they figured this was their only shot to get attention." Braden cursed under his breath. Walter looked furious, while Eleanor's face contorted in a mix of rage and alarm. The guard added, "Some of them are holding signs with Clear Vista's logo. They say they got invites from an online post." He shot Nora a questioning glance. Marcus turned to Nora, baffled. "You didn't post anything, did you?" She shook her head. Then a possibility struck her. Someone on her team at Clear Vista might have seized the moment, wanting to stage a public demonstration. Perhaps they believed it would reinforce the necessity of the new platform or highlight Winthrop's hypocrisy. Eleanor let out a scoff. "This has gone too far. I will not have my home turned into a spectacle of protest, Braden. Deal with it. Call the authorities if you must. We can't let them tarnish our event." Braden was already halfway to the door, presumably to mobilize more security. Nora stepped forward, heart pounding. "Wait, if you send the cops on them, you'll only escalate the situation. Some of these people might have legitimate grievances." Walter's patience snapped. "And what do you propose? Let them barge in here like that hysterical woman earlier, make a mockery of everything we've built." Nora felt the weight of the binder in her bag. Part of her wanted to fling the evidence across the room, let the press see it, and watch the Winthrops scramble. But something inside her whispered caution. She needed a strategic, comprehensive reveal, not a chaotic brawl that might harm the very people she wanted to help. "Let me speak to them," she said calmly. "Not as your enemy, but as someone who understands their plight. I can de-escalate this." Eleanor's mouth opened in protest, but Walter raised a hand to stop her. He studied Nora for a tense moment. "Fine," he said, voice clipped. "You have 5 minutes to clear them out. If you fail, I'll have law enforcement remove them. And if that leads to negative headlines for you, well, that's not our problem, is it?" Nora swallowed, aware of the trap. If she didn't succeed, people could be arrested or manhandled, turning it into a fiasco pinned on her. But she couldn't back down. "All right," she agreed. "I'll do what I can." She and Marcus headed for the door. "Behind them," Eleanor hissed. "Don't let her out of your sight," presumably to the security guard. The guard nodded, stepping after them. Nora took a steadying breath as they walked the corridor. Outside, the muffled chants were already audible. This was bigger than she'd anticipated, but maybe it was the impetus needed to shed more light on Winthrop's actions. One way or another, the night was about to take a dramatic turn. In the courtyard, under strings of fairy lights meant to grace a refined outdoor reception. A small group of about a dozen protesters had gathered. Their signs read phrases like, "Stop predatory lending," and "Winthrop ruined my home." Several guests in tuxedos and gowns stood off to the side, glaring at the disruption. Others watched from a distance, sipping champagne as though it were a curious sideshow. The crisp night air carried the scent of magnolias, mixed with the tension of confrontation. One of the protesters, a middle-aged man in a worn denim jacket, stepped forward as soon as he spotted Nora. "Nora Daniels, are you the lady from Clear Vista?" His voice rang with a mixture of hope and desperation. She approached, hands raised to show she meant no harm. "Yes, that's me. I'm here to listen. Tell me what's going on." A cluster of protesters closed in around her, Marcus by her side, while the Winthrop security guard hovered near the door, presumably waiting to intervene if things turned hostile. The man in denim thrust a folder of documents at her. "They're foreclosing on my house next week. I'm a landscaper. Work's been slow, but I sent partial payments. They refused them. My mortgage is through some firm called Augusta Mortgage, which I heard is tied to Winthrop. I saw a post online saying you could help." Nora's heart panged. "I'm not sure who posted that, but I'll do my best. Clear Vista is developing resources for situations like yours. Do you have evidence that they refused partial payments, even though you were trying to catch up?" He nodded vigorously. "All in there. They returned my checks, claimed I was in default, then scheduled an auction in 2 weeks. Others in the group murmured agreement, some holding their own folders and letters. Each had a story: medical bills, job loss, unscrupulous loan officers, unstoppable interest rate hikes." Nora recognized the pattern, the same pattern detailed in Gerald's binder. Her anger flared, but she forced herself to stay measured. Marcus leaned in, scanning a few of the documents. He looked up, eyes grim. "It's the same scheme. Nora, over and over. They sign people to adjustable rates, wait for a missed payment, then escalate fees and penalties until default is inevitable." The security guard stepped closer. "Miss Daniels, Mr. Winthrop, time's up. These people need to leave or we'll forcibly remove them. That's my order." A woman in the group gasped in alarm, clutching her child's hand. The fear was palpable. If the Winthrops pressed charges for trespassing, some might go to jail, or at least face fines they couldn't afford. Nora raised her voice to address them. "Look, I can't promise a miracle tonight, but I can connect you to legal aid. We're rolling out a new Clear Vista tool that calculates fair repayment plans and flags illegal terms. It's nearly ready." "What do we do in the meantime?" a protester asked, eyes pleading. Nora glanced at Marcus. She was about to respond when the blue drawing room door burst open again, revealing Eleanor in all her furious glory, Brayden right behind her. "This has gone on long enough," Eleanor declared. "You will leave my property now, or we will have you arrested." Nora's throat tightened. The crowd tensed, poised between desperation and defiance. Brayden folded his arms, a predator's gleam in his eye. Marcus stepped toward them, trying to reason. "Mother, if you handle this with force, it will be a public relations nightmare worse than you think. Why not show some compassion?" Eleanor's voice shook with barely suppressed rage. "Compassion don't lecture me about compassion in my own home. These people trespassed, disrupted our event, and tarnished our reputation. If they wanted to negotiate, they could have made an appointment during business hours. Instead, they chose to make a spectacle." A guard moved to grab the man with the denim jacket, who recoiled, dropping his folder. Papers scattered across the stone walkway. Nora lunged to scoop them up, her own frustration boiling over. "Stop! These people came here because your offices shut them out." If your foundation is truly about responsible homeownership, then prove it by talking to them. Eleanor's eyes blazed. Don't you dare question my motives. If you had any respect for this family, you wouldn't be orchestrating this circus. But of course, you prefer chaos. She turned to the guard. Remove them. Chaos indeed followed. A few of the protesters tried to stand their ground. Others started shouting. Marcus attempted to mediate, while Braden's smug grin suggested he was perfectly happy to see them manhandled. Nora's heart pounded as the guards advanced. This was about to become physical. Suddenly, a clear, strong female voice rang out over the courtyard. Hold on, back off heads. Turned to see the same single mother from earlier in the evening, the one who had crashed the party inside. She stood at the threshold, still clutching her purse, tears drying on her cheeks. If you arrest these folks, arrest me too. I came here for help, and I'm not leaving until we're heard. Eleanor's fury reached a fever pitch. I told you we'd address your case privately. Why are you out here stirring up more trouble? I'm not stirring anything, the mother said, voice trembling but resolute. I'm just tired of being silenced. My kids deserve a roof over their heads, not eviction notices. And these people, she gestured to the protesters, they're in the same boat. If your family's new foundation was real, you'd be helping us instead of calling the cops. Nora felt an overwhelming surge of empathy and righteous anger. This moment encapsulated everything she stood for. She reached into her bag, pulling out a single page from Gerald's binder, an executive summary, detailing the link between Augusta Mortgage and Loan and Winthrop Financial. She held it high. This is proof, she declared, voice carrying across the courtyard, that the same company hosting tonight's gala is directly profiting from these foreclosures. You want them to leave quietly, to maintain your image. Not anymore. The truth is coming out. Gasps and hushed murmurs spread. Cameras clicked again. Some guests had begun filming. Eleanor's face paled, and Braden cursed. Walter, who had followed behind, looked torn between fury and desperation. The world seemed to slow as everyone realized how precarious the situation had become. Nora continued, resolute. These families have nothing left to lose. They deserve accountability. And if you won't give it willingly, Clear Vista will. We're days away from launching a public portal that identifies unethical lenders and connects borrowers to legal defenses. Your shell companies can't hide forever. At that, security hesitated. No one wanted to be caught on camera violently ejecting struggling parents and traumatized families. The tension was suffocating. Finally, Eleanor spat. Fine, I'll speak with them briefly. But do not think for a second this absolves you of the mess you've made. Nora, with that reluctant concession, the standoff eased. Guards lowered their arms, and the frantic energy that had electrified the courtyard gave way to a trembling sense of reprieve. For a moment, Nora thought she heard the faintest sound of distant thunder, as if the sky itself acknowledged the storm yet to come. Eleanor had always believed she could quell any rebellion with a stern tone and a flash of aristocratic authority. Yet in the courtyard's tense aftermath, she found herself scrambling for an exit strategy she did not fully control. A tight knot of protesters remained, holding their signs, glancing anxiously between Nora and the security detail. In the soft glow of the mansion's fairy lights, their weary faces seemed even more vulnerable. With an air of forced magnanimity, Eleanor ushered a small group 3 protesters, plus the single mother from inside, toward a side terrace for a hurried discussion. A phalanx of guards trailed behind. Nora, Marcus, and Braden followed at a cautious distance. Walter stayed behind in the courtyard, possibly to prevent the rest of the crowd from storming the main entrance. On the terrace, an ornate wrought iron table and chairs overlooked a manicured rose garden. By day, It might have been a serene spot for afternoon tea. Tonight, it felt like a covert negotiation space under the watchful gaze of half a dozen men in suits. The mother clutched her purse anxiously, while the man in denim flipped through his folder, clearing his throat as though preparing for battle. Eleanor stood at the head of the table. You have 5 minutes. Explain your circumstances. If there's merit, we'll consider an extension on your loans. But let's be clear, this is a private estate, and we cannot be bullied into concessions. She tried to soften her tone, but tension crackled in every syllable. The mother set her jaw. All I ask is a chance to restructure my mortgage without these hidden fees and penalty spikes. I have a job. I'm willing to pay, just not the outrageous sums you've tacked on. My kids shouldn't lose their home because of interest tricks. The denim jacket man chimed in. I sent in partial payments. They sent them back. Said I had to pay the full amount plus a late penalty or face eviction. That's not how it's supposed to work. There should be options. From a few steps away. Nora inserted herself, voice firm. Clear Vista's system would allow borrowers to track every cent of interest and fees, flagging any violations. If Winthrop truly wants to be philanthropic, you could adopt a similar transparency tool. Show you have nothing to hide. Braden rolled his eyes. We're not about to let some glitchy software control our lending policies. This conversation is about a handful of special cases, not a complete overhaul. The mother's eyes flashed. Special case? Is that what I am? A statistic you can toss aside. People like me and him. She nodded at the denim man. We're not cases. We're working families. Eleanor let out a stiff breath. We're willing to grant you, say, a 60-day extension to resolve payments. We'll contact you Monday with a revised schedule. It was a token concession, obviously meant to placate the immediate crisis. Nora recognized it as pure damage control, no real accountability or structural reform. Still, the mother sighed in relief, tears brimming again. For her, it was the difference between sleeping in her home or on the street next week. Marcus crossed his arms. And the others? There are hundreds more with the same issue. A 2-month extension for a handful of people doesn't fix the underlying problem. Eleanor's forced smile faltered. This is as far as I'm willing to go tonight. If that's not enough, then perhaps you'd prefer discussing it with our attorneys tomorrow morning. She snapped her gaze at the mother. Are we clear? The tension in that final question was almost unbearable. The mother and the denim man exchanged glances. Both seemed torn between gratitude for the short-term reprieve and outrage that no deeper solutions were offered. Finally, the mother nodded, her shoulders sagging. I'll take it. I can't risk losing my home. The denim man did the same, albeit through gritted teeth. Eleanor allowed herself a satisfied nod, as though she had dispensed charity like a benevolent queen. Good. Then please leave the premises. I'll have my staff contact you for details. And next time, use proper channels. With a flick of her wrist, she motioned for the security guards to escort them out. Braden stepped forward, quietly triumphant, as if to reinforce the Winthrop dominance. You heard my mother. Move along. His gaze lingered on Nora, a silent dare for her to protest. But she read the subtext if she pushed harder. They'd rescind even this small concession. She couldn't condemn these people to certain eviction for the sake of a grandstanding moment. Marcus placed a gentle hand on Nora's arm. She swallowed her anger, giving a small nod to the protesters. I promise I'll follow up, she whispered, voice thick with frustration. You haven't seen the last of me. The mother's eyes shone with a muted hope, and then the small group turned to exit with security flanking them. Silence fell on the terrace as the footsteps receded down the gravel path. The faint hum of the ongoing gala carried from the distance. a surreal reminder that a high society event was still in full swing. Eleanor's posture relaxed, although her guarded hostility remained. "Well, that's settled," she declared, turning to Marcus and Nora. "I trust you understand now the lengths we're willing to go to protect our reputation and our guests." Nora exhaled, focusing on the rose garden rather than Eleanor's steely gaze. "All you did was stall. You haven't addressed the root. This will keep happening." Braden let out a caustic chuckle. "We handle problems as they arise. We don't need a sermon on morality. We're a business, not a charity. It's a business built on exploitation," Marcus retorted. "You think granting short-term mercy absolves years of predatory lending? One day, it'll catch up to you." Eleanor gave a thin smile. "I doubt that. The Winthrop name carries weight, and we have extensive relationships across media and government. If you continue this crusade, you'll find those doors slammed in your faces." But Nora's mind churned with possibilities. She had Gerald's binder. She had stories from real victims. She had enough ammunition for a public expose. What she needed was the perfect stage, a moment so large and attention-grabbing that the Winthrops couldn't bury it with hush money or PR spin. Then she remembered the half-formed plan she'd toyed with weeks ago, something extravagant and risky. "Don't be so sure," she said softly, letting a defiant edge creep into her voice. "You underestimate how powerful a single spotlight can be if it's bright enough." She glanced at Marcus. He met her eyes, a flicker of understanding passing between them. They had shared illusions of grandeur once. Maybe now was the time to make them reality. Eleanor waved dismissively, already turning on her heel. "Believe what you wish. Just know that if you force our hand, we'll respond without restraint." With that, she strode back inside, Braden in tow. The Winthrops had drawn their line in the sand. "Oh, aities?" Nora and Marcus stood alone on the terrace, the night breeze brushing their faces like a silent chorus, urging them to fight on. The next day, Nora woke before dawn in the cramped guest room of a small Atlanta motel. She and Marcus had left Magnolia Hall late the previous night, weary and burning with unresolved anger. They hadn't bothered returning to their usual apartment in the city. Marcus insisted they avoid predictable locations in case the Winthrops tried a more direct approach to retrieve or destroy Gerald's binder. Paranoia. Maybe, but after the corporate espionage fiasco 3 years ago, neither of them trusted the family's ability to play fair. Nora stretched, her muscles aching from tension, and slid out of the stiff bed to check her phone. 10 missed calls, mostly from unknown numbers. Her email was flooded with messages from reporters, local activists, and even a few industry colleagues who had seen social media posts about the Winthrop protest. Word of last night's confrontation was circulating faster than she expected. Marcus stirred awake. "Who's blowing up your phone?" he asked, voice groggy. She flipped through the emails, brow furrowing. Reporters from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a couple from smaller outlets. Some mentioned me by name, referencing Clear Vista's evidence of fraudulent practices. Someone must have live-streamed the standoff. Marcus rubbed his eyes. The Winthrops probably hate that, but it's not enough to sink them. They'll spin it. "We need something bigger, a platform that can't be dismissed." Nora bit her lip. Last night she'd hinted at a bold idea, something about drawing a spotlight so large that Winthrop's spin machine would be forced to address the allegations publicly. She recalled an earlier conversation they'd had about the upcoming Southeastern Tech Summit, a high-profile event where top financiers and tech innovators gathered. Clear Vista had snagged a small presentation slot, hoping to attract further investments. But if they orchestrated a more dramatic gesture, the entire summit's media presence might converge on them. She typed a quick message to her chief developer, Tiana, to check on the final updates to Clear Vista's new platform features. Then she looked at Marcus. We have a slot at the Southeastern Tech Summit in 2 weeks. It's not exactly the biggest stage, but all the major local news outlets and some national tech reporters will be there. Could we pivot that to a full-blown expose? Marcus considered it. We could, but it might not capture the everyday folks who need to see it most. Unless we do something else to draw in broader coverage. Something theatrical, for lack of a better word. Nora leaned back against the headboard, a flicker of excitement creeping in. What if we tie it to a demonstration flight or a large-scale event, like if we landed a private plane right outside the summit venue, emblazoned with Clear Vista's name, then held a press conference on the spot? He snorted. A private plane. We'd look like hypocrites fighting for the underprivileged while flashing wealth. Besides, we can't afford that. Nora smiled thinly. We can't afford a brand new plane, but I do know a pilot friend from my Army days who runs an aviation service. We might rent or buy something older and refurbish it, turn it into a traveling symbol for our cause. Access for all scrawled across the fuselage. It'd be audacious, but exactly the kind of stunt the media can't ignore. Marcus blinked, clearly taken aback by her ambition. You're serious. She reached for his hand. Dead serious. The Winthrops brandished their illusions of grandeur at every turn. Let's out-grandeur them, but with a purpose to expose their lies and uplift those they exploited. I want them to see what real power looks like when it's driven by justice, not greed. 4 days later, Nora and Marcus stood on a remote airfield outside Macon, Georgia. The heat was oppressive, shimmering waves rising off the asphalt runway. A row of small planes rested by a corrugated metal hangar, and among them was the battered twin-engine turboprop they had come to see. Its paint was chipped, and the nose bore evidence of past mishaps. But to Nora, it glimmered with possibility. Her old Army friend, Captain Janelle Crawford, greeted them with a wide grin. Janelle had served as a helicopter pilot in the same logistics division where Nora handled supply chains. They'd stayed loosely in touch, exchanging holiday messages and career updates. When Nora reached out about renting or buying a plane for a publicity project, Janelle had been intrigued. Now, standing here in fatigues and aviator sunglasses, Janelle exuded the same confident energy that once guided her through hostile airspace overseas. This is the one, Janelle said, patting the aircraft's fuselage. Officially called a Beechcraft King Air 200, but let's just call her the workhorse. She's got a few miles on her, but the engines run fine, and the interior can be refitted for decent passenger comfort. Marcus circled the plane, skeptical. It's not exactly a Gulfstream. Nora smirked. That's the point. We're not Winthrops. We don't need sleek extravagance, just something that can land reliably and grab attention. We'll paint it with Clear Vista's branding, add a bold message about financial justice, and then we fly in, uninvited, to the Southeastern Tech Summit. Janelle raised a brow. Uninvited. You sure about that? Nora shrugged. We do have official passes for the conference, just not a scheduled press conference of our own. But if we land dramatically, we'll create a spectacle. Cameras will turn our way. Leaning against the plane's wing, Marcus exhaled. We're playing a high-stakes game. If it fails, we'll be ridiculed or worse, overshadowed by a scandal that could cost us future investors. Nora set a hand on the plane's metal skin, feeling the residual warmth from the sun. We're already risking everything by going against the Winthrops. Might as well do it with flair. Once we have the spotlight, we'll release Gerald Fry's documents, organize a public demonstration of Clear Vista's new features. People will see how we detect predatory loans in real time. After that, we can't be silenced, no matter how hard they try. Janelle nodded, her grin returning. Count me in. I'll prep the plane for a flight to Atlanta next week. Paint job, mechanical checks. If you can handle the cost, I'll handle the rest. She quoted a figure that made Marcus whistle under his breath, but Nora merely nodded. It was steep, but still far less than a brand new jet. They'd have to dip into Clear Vista's operational budget and pray that the short-term hit would pay off in long-term impact. They sealed the deal with a handshake. As they walked back to their car, Marcus turned to Nora with a mixture of admiration and anxiety. You're unstoppable. You know that I'm just bracing for the fallout. Nora gave him a small, earnest smile. Fallout or not, this is the path we chose. If we succeed, we shift the narrative, rally public support, and corner the Winthrops. If we fail, well, at least we fought with everything we had. She glanced back at the battered plane, already visualizing its new coat of paint. Sometimes, winning means rewriting the rules, taking the fight to higher ground, or, in our case, the sky. Over the next week, the Southeastern Tech Summit buzzed with excitement. Held at Atlanta's sprawling convention center, it promised keynote speeches from industry leaders, demonstrations of cutting-edge AI, and high-profile investors scouting for the next big thing. Clear Vista had a modest booth scheduled in the FinTech Pavilion, slot number C17 overshadowed by corporate giants. Still, Nora's team worked around the clock to finalize their platform's new features for a big reveal. Behind the scenes, they coordinated quietly with a few sympathetic journalists who had covered Clear Vista's early milestones. Nora hinted at a major announcement that would occur on the summit's second day, though she withheld specifics about the plane. Tiana, the lead developer, spent sleepless nights debugging the real-time interest calculator and foreclosure risk analyzer. The rest of the staff scoured the internet for testimonies from victims, compiling a heartbreaking tapestry of stories that would underscore the platform's necessity. Marcus, meanwhile, juggled calls with legal advisors about how to present Gerald Fry's evidence. They needed to ensure no detail could be dismissed as hearsay or tampering. The cunning of Winthrop lawyers was legendary, and they'd exploit any loophole. Still, the pieces were falling into place, and Nora felt that curious rush of adrenaline that preludes a major confrontation. On the morning of day one, she arrived at the convention center wearing a crisp navy blazer and skirt, brimming with nervous energy. The FinTech Pavilion was awash in neon signage and sleek product demos. After exchanging greetings with Tiana and the other staff at Clear Vista's booth, Nora slipped away to scout the environment. She recognized a few faces reporters who had emailed her. Some gave her discreet nods, others a wink, silently confirming they'd be ready to broadcast the next day's spectacle. Halfway through her reconnaissance, she nearly collided with someone stepping out of a VIP lounge. Her heart sank. It was Braden Winthrop. He wore a smug expression and a tailored suit, as if claiming the space. By his side stood a tall man with slicked back hair, likely an executive from Preston Finance, the Winthrop's ally. They both froze upon spotting her. Well, well, Braden drawled, ignoring the passing throng of conference goers. Didn't expect to see you skulking around here. Nora, let me guess still peddling that half-finished finance app. She forced a calm smile. We have a booth, like every other legitimate startup. Maybe you'll drop by, see what real transparency looks like. He let out a low laugh. Transparency? Sure. I heard you might try to stage some over-the-top announcement, probably to smear Winthrop's reputation. Word travels? You know. He shot her a predatory grin. I'd watch your step. We've updated our legal strategies. One wrong move and Clear Vista will face defamation suits, licensing blocks, anything we can throw at you. Nora's pulse quickened. So the Winthrops had caught wind of her big reveal. She mentally thanked her team for keeping the plane details secret. She stepped closer, letting a slight edge creep into her voice. Legal intimidation doesn't erase the evidence of what you've done. Maybe you should worry about that. Not me. Braden's facade wavered briefly, but he covered it with a sneer. Have fun with your fairy tale. Come on, he said to his companion. Let's see if the real innovators have something worth investing in. And he brushed past, leaving Nora with a churn of conflicting emotions, anger, fear, and an unshakable resolve to see this through. The next morning dawned cool and overcast, perfect flying weather, according to Janelle. While her Clear Vista team manned the booth at the summit, Nora and Marcus drove to the small airfield outside Atlanta, where they found the freshly painted King Air 200 waiting on the tarmac. It gleamed in white and turquoise, with Clear Vista emblazoned on the fuselage in bold letters and a slogan across the tail, Financial Justice for All. Nora's heart pounded at the sight. This was really happening. Janelle, sporting aviator shades and a flight jacket, approached them with a grin. She's fueled up, tested, and ready. We've got clearance for takeoff. Are we sure about the landing site? Marcus checked his watch. The open grass field next to the convention center is technically municipal property. Right. According to the city's zoning maps, it's not restricted airspace, though they normally don't expect planes to land there. You better have some skill. Janelle, she scoffed playfully. Don't insult me. I've landed choppers on desert outposts smaller than a tennis court. This field will be a breeze as long as no one tries to block us. They boarded, stowing Nora's laptop bag and the precious binder in a secured compartment. Directement. The interior smelled of fresh upholstery, the seat cushions reupholstered in matching turquoise. Once strapped in, Janelle ran through the pre-flight checklist. Engines roared to life, the propellers a blur. Nora's stomach twisted with excitement and nerves. She glanced at Marcus, who gave her a reassuring nod. The takeoff was smooth. The aircraft lifted into the air, banked gracefully, and set course for downtown Atlanta. Looking out the window, Nora marveled at how small everything appeared below a patchwork of highways and suburban sprawl. Perhaps that's how the Winthrops see the world, she thought. Tiny pieces to be manipulated. But soon, that vantage would change today. She intended to bring power back to the people on the ground. As the city skyline came into view, Janelle radioed in for any final updates. The plan was to broadcast a short live video from inside the plane, teasing a big reveal at the summit, then land in the adjacent field where their supporters and press contacts waited. If everything goes right, Nora mused, we'll have an audience large enough to overshadow any corporate PR the Winthrops planned. Nora pulled out her phone and launched a social media live stream. Good morning, everyone, she said, her voice trembling only slightly. This is Nora Daniels, CEO of Clear Vista, coming to you live from our plane. The Workhorse. We're about to touch down near the Southeastern Tech Summit. We have an announcement that will change how we fight predatory lending and champion financial justice. Stay tuned. She ended the clip and checked the viewer count rapidly climbing, with shares multiplying. Anticipation buzzed in her veins. Marcus gazed at her with pride. It's go time. Within minutes, Janelle engaged the landing approach. From her seat, Nora glimpsed the bright lights of the convention center and the designated patch of grass. Small figures dotted the perimeter, likely reporters, curious onlookers, maybe security. She inhaled a steadying breath. In less than 5 minutes, they'd be on the ground, and the biggest confrontation of her life would commence. The plane's wheels touched down with a lurch on the uneven field. Janelle skillfully kept the aircraft steady, throttling down as they rolled to a stop just a short distance from a hastily erected crowd barrier. Outside, a knot of reporters, Conference attendees and bystanders gawked. Cell phones were raised, cameras flashed, and a swirl of excitement rippled through the gathering. A few security personnel dashed toward the plane, likely unsure how to handle this unorthodox landing. Nora's pulse thundered in her ears. She caught Marcus's eye, and he gave an encouraging smile. "You ready for this?" he asked. She nodded, forcing a grin despite her stomach tying itself in knots. Janelle opened the door, letting in a gust of cool morning air. "Showtime," she said, winking at them. Nora took the lead, descending the short stairway onto grass still wet with dew. A hush fell over the crowd, as though the scene was plucked straight from a dramatic film. Then the questions came in a chaotic wave, voices overlapping, shouting inquiries about Clear Vista, about a rumored expose, about the plane. She raised her hands, signaling for quiet. Marcus stepped beside her, and Tiana, who had rushed from the conference center, emerged at the barrier, waving. "Over here," Nora Tiana called, pointing to an impromptu stage area, a small podium, a portable speaker system, and a projection screen. "Perfect." Nora and Marcus navigated through the parted crowd. Security guards hovered at the edges, eyes darting with uncertainty. "Anisai." A few outraged event organizers in suits tried to intercept, but the crush of cameras and journalists was overwhelming. In the swirl of voices, Nora caught someone mention Winthrop and lawsuit threats, confirming the family's representatives were somewhere nearby. At the makeshift podium, Nora tested the microphone. Static crackled, then settled. The crowd quieted. She could see a row of cameras from local TV stations, plus multiple phones live streaming, a perfect setting for a revelation no spin doctor could fully contain. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice resonating through the speakers. "My name is Nora Daniels, CEO of Clear Vista. We're here today because the Southeastern Tech Summit is about innovation, yet too often innovation ignores the struggles of everyday people, especially when it comes to finance. That changes now." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Clear Vista has developed a platform that analyzes mortgages, lending terms, and interest hikes in real time, flagging predatory clauses before borrowers sign away their futures. But that's only half the story. The other half is about companies that profit from manipulating these loans, forcing families into foreclosure, then flipping their homes for massive gains. A buzz rippled through the onlookers. Nora glanced at Tiana, who connected a laptop to the projector. On the screen behind them appeared graphs and spreadsheets, evidence from Gerald Fry's binder. Nora continued, "For months, we've gathered proof that certain lenders systematically target vulnerable populations. They hide behind shell corporations, but we trace them to two primary culprits, Preston Finance and Winthrop Financial." She paused for dramatic effect. Yes, that Winthrop Financial, the so-called philanthropic legacy that thrives on quietly evicting families. A clamor of gasps and murmurs broke out. Some reporters leaned closer, scribbling notes. Others aimed their cameras at the data. Nora swallowed, adrenaline surging. No going back now. In the middle of Nora's presentation, a commotion arose at the rear of the crowd. People parted as two men in dark suits pushed forward. One was Braden Winthrop. The other wore a Preston Finance badge. Their expressions ranged from fury to alarm. Braden jabbed a finger at Nora, voice carrying over the hum of voices. "Enough of this charade," he barked. "Stop feeding the public these lies. Security, shut this down." A few uniformed officers hovered, uncertain whom they should obey. The Southeastern Tech Summit's own staff tried to restore order, but it was a losing battle. Cameras pivoted, capturing every second of the drama. Nora refused to yield her microphone. "We have documentation," she repeated, pointing to the screen, internal memos linking Winthrop and Preston to strategic foreclosure tactics. Real lives have been ruined by your policies. Stop denying it. Braden's face reddened. Those documents are fabricated. And you, he glared at Marcus, you'd betray your own family for this circus. How dare you use my mother's philanthropic foundation as a punching bag? Marcus stepped forward, taking the mic from Nora with a calm but firm grip. Brother, philanthropic foundations don't terrorize single mothers into default. Our father admitted as much behind closed doors. He scanned the crowd, letting them see his conviction. We're tired of watching families lose homes for profit. Clear Vista offers transparency and justice, not spin. The Preston finance executive hissed. This is blatant defamation. You're all going to regret it in court. He tried to yank the projector's cable, but Tiana swiftly shielded the laptop. A security guard intervened, ushering him back. The sight of official badges gave the corporate men pause, especially with so many reporters filming. Nora stepped back to the mic, ignoring her racing heart. These men want to silence us with lawsuits, but they can't silence every family they've harmed. I encourage anyone who's faced unjust foreclosure to come forward. Use our new platform. Let your voices be heard. She signaled Tiana, who tapped a few keys. The screen switched to a Clear Vista webpage with a large Report Abuse button. Questions erupted from the press. When will the platform go live? How do people file claims? Have you been threatened by Winthrop before? Nora answered methodically, unveiling that Clear Vista's updated features were live today, including an anonymous tip submission system. She urged reporters to look at the data themselves, to interview families already queued up to testify. Braden, cornered by the wave of public scrutiny, made one last attempt to wrest the narrative. All you have is hearsay and stolen records. We'll see how your precious documents hold up in court, he snarled. Marcus didn't blink. Oh, they'll hold up. We have sworn affidavits, chain of custody evidence, and multiple backups in separate locations. Even if you try to bury one source, half a dozen others stand ready. This is bigger than the Winthrops now. His gaze swept over the cameras. It's about restoring faith in a system that's been corrupted for too long. Before Braden could muster another retort, a deep voice behind him boomed, Marcus, Nora, that's enough. The crowd parted again, revealing Walter Winthrop. He looked haggard, as though he'd aged a decade overnight. His shoulders were slumped, yet there was a steely determination in his eyes. The father had joined the public battlefield, and for a moment, everyone fell silent, awaiting the final volley. Walter Winthrop stood at the edge of the impromptu stage, scanning the sea of faces: journalists, protesters, curious onlookers, Clear Vista staff, and a smattering of outraged finance executives. The noise died down, replaced by a tense hush. Nora braced herself. She half expected him to unleash a torrent of denial or threaten a monstrous lawsuit, but instead, his gaze settled on Marcus, and something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps. Son, he said, voice rough. I had hoped to handle this discreetly. It's gone too far. He paused, adjusting his tie as if the noose around his neck had tightened. We always believed we were preserving a legacy, but maybe we lost our way. A ripple of surprise spread through the crowd. Braden snapped, Father, don't do this. We can still fight. But Walter ignored him, stepping onto the stage. He took a trembling breath and faced the journalists. I won't pretend innocence. Our family has made decisions that hurt people. The mortgage crisis was complicated, but we exploited it at times for profit. I'm sorry. A collective gasp. Nora stared, hardly believing her ears. Was this a genuine confession or a carefully calculated tactic? Marcus's mouth hung open. unable to form words. Even Tiana lowered her camera phone in shock. Braden sputtered, "This is insane. You can't just—" Walter raised a hand, silencing his younger son. "No more lies. The documents my daughter-in-law has, they're authentic. I can't shield the firm from accountability any longer." He looked down, as though the admission weighed on him physically. Nora's heart hammered. She remembered how coldly Walter had threatened her with her mother's foreclosure record. Now he was publicly admitting fault. She glanced at Marcus, who seemed torn between astonishment and cautious hope. Could this be real? Camera flashes intensified. Reporters lobbed urgent questions. "Mr. Winthrop, does this mean you concede that Winthrop Financial engaged in illegal practices? Will you step down from leadership? Will you support restitution for the victims?" Walter lifted his gaze. "I will cooperate with any official investigation. Winthrop Financial has resources that should go toward reparations, not stonewalling. This fiasco ends now." He swallowed hard, flicking a glance at Nora that almost seemed like a silent plea for mercy. Braden went pale, then furious. "You're destroying us, Father." Years of carefully built Walter rounded on him, voice trembling with anger and sorrow. "We built it on broken backs and homes. Braden, we twisted the law to fill our coffers. There are lines that must not be crossed. If you can't see that, then maybe we deserve to fall." Stunned silence settled once more. The father's words hung in the air, a condemnation of the entire empire. Nora's mind raced. This confession could accelerate everything: criminal charges, restitution claims. Winthrop's philanthropic foundation might be repurposed into a genuine tool for good if Walter followed through. But was this a short-term PR move or a real willingness to make amends? One thing was certain: the unstoppable wave of revelations had begun. Across the crowd, cameras zoomed in for every nuance. People tapped on phones, broadcasting live feeds. The Southeastern Tech Summit was overshadowed by a story that would dominate headlines. Winthrop heir confesses mortgage exploitation. Nora inhaled, feeling both relief and the heavy responsibility of next steps. She stepped forward, microphone trembling in her grasp. "Then let's proceed with full transparency," she said. "Clear Vista will provide a platform for impacted families to join class action suits and to share their stories. And if you're serious about restitution, Mr. Winthrop, we welcome your cooperation." Walter nodded, expression grim. "I meant what I said. No more secrets." In the hours that followed, the summit's regular agenda crumbled under the weight of the unfolding spectacle. Gil. Nora's makeshift press conference evolved into a marathon Q&A session, with Walter Winthrop at times fielding questions directly, though Braden stormed off in fury. Marcus publicly distanced himself from the Winthrop empire, vowing to assist Clear Vista's efforts in drafting a settlement framework for wronged homeowners. The story dominated social media and local newscasts, each outlet scrambling for the latest soundbite. Eventually, the convention center staff insisted that the show move indoors, partly to restore order outside, partly to give the media official space to set up. Nora, Marcus, Walter, Tiana, and a half-dozen reporters filed into a large seminar room, typically used for panel discussions. She tried to ignore her fatigue. Adrenaline still coursed through her, but she sensed the emotional toll was only just beginning to register. Inside, Tiana quickly set up the projector again. Journalists from a dozen outlets formed a ring of microphones, their eyes gleaming with curiosity and ambition. A city council representative slid in, checking his phone repeatedly. Nora overheard him telling someone the mayor might intervene soon, likely to open an investigation into Winthrop's local dealings. Walter, looking every bit his 70-plus years, sank into a chair at the front. He wiped sweat from his brow with a handkerchief. Nora almost felt sorry for him almost. He's reaping what he sowed, she reminded herself. But the visible remorse in his eyes stirred a complicated sympathy. A reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution took the lead. Mr. Winthrop, you've admitted your company used exploitative tactics. Can you specify the scale of these practices and whether you believe laws were broken? Walter hesitated, then cleared his throat. I can't speak to every detail offhand, but from the records I've seen, yes, laws were broken. We manipulated subprime loans. We adjusted interest rates unfairly. And we profited from quick foreclosures through shell companies. The scale, he sighed, looking truly pained. It's large. We need forensic accountants to dissect it thoroughly. A collective murmur. Another reporter pounced. So you're offering full cooperation with law enforcement. Walter nodded, casting a fleeting glance at Nora. Yes, I will personally ensure access to any files Clear Vista or the authorities require, as well as the Philanthropic Foundation's accounts. If restitution is demanded, I won't fight it. Nora's chest tightened. This was the largest admission of wrongdoing she'd ever witnessed in real time. Part of her expected the Winthrop patriarch to revert to self-preservation at any moment, but he just looked defeated, as though acknowledging the inevitable. Marcus stepped in. We're urging all families impacted by Winthrop Financial's mortgages to use Clear Vista's new platform. They can submit their loan documents, experiences, and any supporting evidence. We'll compile these reports for a class action approach. And yes, we'll share that data with prosecutors. A middle-aged man in a rumpled blazer asked Nora, how do you plan to prevent retaliation against borrowers who come forward historically? Powerful institutions have harassed whistleblowers. She gave a steady nod. We've partnered with multiple nonprofit legal groups. Any homeowner who submits evidence can opt to remain anonymous until formal legal representation is arranged. We'll also publicize every attempt at intimidation or harassment. This is a new era of transparency. Walter slumped further, each word seemingly digging into him like a blade. Nora recognized the cost of making amends after decades of denial, but her resolve would not waver. Real justice meant real accountability, even if it meant dismantling the entire Winthrop empire piece by piece. Late that evening, after the media frenzy had partially subsided, Nora and Marcus returned to the cramped motel where they'd been staying. Exhaustion draped over them like a lead blanket. Tiana and the rest of the Clear Vista team remained at the summit, processing thousands of new user registrations. The website's servers were straining from the sudden spike in traffic. Public interest soared, a double-edged sword success in shining a light on injustice, but also the possibility of overextending Clear Vista's resources. Nora flopped onto the motel bed, her mind still swirling with images of flashing cameras, Walter's broken expression, Braden's fury, and the unstoppable flood of foreclosure victims stepping into the spotlight. Marcus set down his laptop and slumped beside her. For a moment, they just breathed. We did it, he said softly. At least, we did something big. Feels surreal, she nodded, gazing at the stained motel ceiling. It's a beginning. The real fight: legal battles, corporate bankruptcies, restitution funds, that's all still ahead. A weight pressed on her chest. The path forward was a legal quagmire, full of depositions, countersuits, and the possible meltdown of the entire financial network that once propped up the Winthrops. Can we handle that, she wondered? Marcus turned onto his side, resting a hand on hers. I know it's overwhelming, but we're not alone anymore. Did you see the outpouring on social media? Hashtags about predatory lending are trending nationwide. People want to believe in a solution. She mustered a faint smile. Yeah, it's incredible. Let's hope we can live up to those expectations. Clear Vista's about to become more than a startup. It might become a movement. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. A knock sounded at their door, startling them. Marcus exchanged a wary glance with Nora, then rose to peer through the peephole. He recognized the figure outside and let out a short sigh. "It's Walter," he murmured, opening the door. Walter Winthrop, still wearing the same suit from the summit, now wrinkled and stained with sweat, stood in the flickering hallway light. He looked frail, holding a file folder under one arm. "May I come in?" he asked hoarsely. Nora's stomach tightened, but she steeled herself, remembering that this man had just made a public confession that could expedite justice for countless families. "Yes," she said quietly, motioning him inside. He perched on the lone motel chair, glancing around the cramped space with an air of weary humility. I, "I'm sorry to intrude," he began. "I left the summit after the press interviews. Braden's furious. He wants to fight everything, denies all wrongdoing, but I felt compelled to see you." Nora sat up. "Why to negotiate? We can't offer you immunity or anything." Walter shook his head vigorously. "No, not that. I came to give you this." He handed over the folder, trembling slightly. Marcus opened it, revealing more documents, additional transaction logs. "Perhaps." Walter cleared his throat. "These are from the Foundation's private archives. Every large-scale foreclosure deal that used philanthropic funds as collateral or a back channel. It's a testament to how deep the rot runs. You'll need it if you want full restitution for victims." Nora felt conflicting emotions swirl. Gratitude for his cooperation. Anger for how long he'd withheld it. Sadness for the irreparable damage done. She studied Walter's lined face. He looked decades older than when she first met him. "Thank you," she managed, voice hushed. "This could help a lot of people." He nodded, gaze falling. "I intend to cooperate fully. Whatever investigators need, I'll provide." His tone broke. "I know it won't atone for everything, but maybe it's a start." In the days that followed, the national media seized on the Winthrop saga like sharks scenting blood. Asom. Morning talk shows, primetime news, and online streams all broadcast segments detailing how a revered old money family admitted to profiteering off the housing crisis. Experts debated the implications, and activists cheered the public contrition, though some accused Walter of staging a controlled confession to salvage the Winthrop brand. Either way, the cat was out of the bag. Amid the deluge, Clear Vista's user base exploded from a modest 50,000 to over 500,000 in less than a week. Borrowers flooded the platform with scanned mortgage documents, complaint forms, and personal testimonies. Tiana's dev team scrambled to scale servers, while Marcus coordinated with nonprofit lawyers to handle the avalanche of potential lawsuits. Nora found herself fielding interviews, sometimes from dawn to midnight, explaining how Clear Vista flagged hidden fees, balloon payments, and adjustable rates designed to fail, but not everyone was supportive. Braden Winthrop, still an executive in the company, launched a counteroffensive. He appeared on business news channels to downplay the admissions, calling them partial misunderstandings, insisting that no broad conspiracy existed. He threatened countersuits, claimed that the class action rumors were unsubstantiated allegations, and even tried to pivot blame onto smaller, third-party brokers. Nora saw the swirl of propaganda intensify. The last thing she wanted was for the public to forget the real victims. Overshadowed by corporate spin, on a particularly stressful evening, she collapsed on the couch of Clear Vista's small office, exhausted after a barrage of negative press. Tiana quietly placed a cup of hot tea beside her. "We need a new move," Tiana said gently. Braden's controlling the narrative on certain channels. Nora's gaze drifted to a framed photo on the office wall, her mother standing outside their Detroit home, smiling with a mix of pride and anxiety. That was before the foreclosure heartbreak. We need something unstoppable, she whispered. We need the voices of those who suffered to be louder than corporate PR. Marcus, typing away at a table littered with documents, nodded. What if we hold a mass rally, a public demonstration by the families who faced eviction? Let them speak about their experiences, show their mortgages, reveal the nightmares they lived. We can do it in front of the Winthrop Foundation's headquarters for maximum impact. Nora considered it. It would definitely attract coverage, especially if we coordinate with a few national reporters who've been sympathetic. But we risk confrontation again. We saw how quickly these things can escalate. Tiana snapped her fingers. But this time, we'll have official permits, a defined schedule, and heavy press presence. The Winthrops can't just unleash security on cameras in broad daylight. We'll bring attorneys, too. Nora sipped her tea, tension slowly easing as the plan took shape. A rally for truth and accountability, highlighting how Clear Vista is unearthing cases of abuse. We can invite other lenders, non-corrupt ones, to show there's a better way to do business. Frame it as a path forward, not just condemnation. Marcus's phone pinged with a message. He read it, grimacing. Breaking news. Braden's asked the Winthrop board to remove father from any position of authority, claiming he's mentally unfit. A wave of sorrow swept through Nora. She wasn't surprised. The family's internal power struggle was hitting a boiling point. So, it's official. The empire's fracturing. Let's hold this rally soon, within days. If Walter's out, we lose our biggest ally inside the company. Time to lock in a date. In that moment, exhaustion gave way to renewed fire. The final showdown wasn't behind them. It was just getting started. 2 days later, in a bustling plaza outside the Winthrop Foundation headquarters in downtown Atlanta, a sea of protesters, supporters, and media personnel converged for the planned rally. The building, a towering edifice of glass and marble, reflected the morning sun, turning it into a glittering backdrop for the stage that Clear Vista's team had erected. Banners reading "Justice for Homeowners and Transparency" now waved among the crowd. Nora stood backstage, heart pounding. She wore a simple black blazer over a bright turquoise blouse, matching Clear Vista's signature color. She clutched a folder of testimonies, heart-wrenching stories from families who lost everything. Tiana handled the sound system, while Marcus conferred with a group of volunteer lawyers. Walter Winthrop was nowhere in sight. Rumors swirled that Braden had forced him into a swift retirement pending legal reviews. Part of Nora pitied the old man. But the rally's purpose was bigger than family drama. It was about real change. One by one, local politicians took the microphone to denounce predatory lending. Church leaders spoke about community impacts, while activists recounted personal horror stories of eviction. The crowd responded with a mixture of cheers and tears, forging a collective sense of both outrage and hope. Then it was Nora's turn. As she approached the podium, cameras flashed incessantly. A hush fell over the crowd, the magnitude of this moment settling in. She took a moment to breathe, scanning the thousands gathered. She spotted the single mother from Magnolia Hall and the denim jacket man. She saw new faces, some smiling, some grim, all eager for justice. "Thank you," she began, voice echoing through the PA system. "I'm Nora Daniels, CEO of Clear Vista. I stand here today not as a wealthy mogul or a seasoned politician, but as someone who's been on the other side, whose family was torn apart by a rigged financial system." She paused, letting her personal connection sink in. "Today, we're here to show that ordinary people can fight back." She lifted the folder. Inside are hundreds of testimonies from families who entrusted their dreams to lenders they thought were reputable, only to discover hidden fees, ballooning interest, and unscrupulous practices. Many of these lenders connect back to shell companies under the umbrella of Winthrop Financial and their partner, Preston Finance. A flicker of movement caught her eye on a nearby rooftop security watchers. Perhaps, she pressed on. We're not here just to protest. Clear Vista offers a solution real-time loan audits, a centralized complaints database, and legal aid connections. But we need collective will. We need regulators to stop turning a blind eye, the media to keep digging for truth, and every homeowner to stay vigilant. The crowd applauded. Some chanted, "Stop the greed! Stop the greed!" She looked over at Marcus, who gave her a thumbs up. Encouraged, she closed with a vow. Let this rally mark the beginning of a new era. No more victims, no more hidden clauses. Together, we can restore integrity to lending and ensure every family has a fair shot at the American dream. As the crowd roared its approval, a commotion stirred at the perimeter. People parted, and in a jarring echo of the tech summit chaos, Braden Winthrop emerged, flanked by corporate lawyers and a small phalanx of private security. Tension crackled through the air. Nora's breath caught. He wouldn't dare try something violent here. Would he? He marched toward the stage, ignoring the jeers. Cameras pivoted. A storm of confrontation brewed, and Nora braced herself for yet another test of resolve. Braden climbed the stage steps, security forming a perimeter that shoved aside some of the volunteer lawyers trying to block him. He stood before the same microphone Nora had just used, ignoring her as if she were a minor obstacle in his path. Boos erupted from the crowd, with a few people shouting, "Go home, Winthrop, or where's our money?" Cell phones were raised in 100 shaky hands, capturing the tension in real time, face set like stone. Braden raised both palms, demanding silence. The jeers subsided into a low rumble. "I came here to set the record straight," he began, voice taut with anger. What happened at the tech summit and the subsequent media blitz is a gross exaggeration of isolated errors. Yes, some lending practices went awry, and yes, my father made misguided statements. He's no longer in a stable mental state to judge these matters. Nora's jaw clenched. Throwing your father under the bus? Nice. The crowd reacted with outrage. A few threw their placards on stage, while others booed loudly. Yet Braden pressed on, unfazed. Winthrop Financial remains committed to ethical lending. We regret any miscommunication that led to hardship, but these class action suits orchestrated by Clear Vista are baseless. Our attorneys will reveal the truth in court. Marcus stepped forward, forcibly taking a spot near the mic. Baseless. We have your own father's admission. We have internal memos. Braden snapped, signed by mid-level staff, not the board. And father's confession was coerced by emotional blackmail. You conveniently forget that in a crisis. People say things under duress. A fresh wave of booing ensued. The single mother from before held up her phone, live streaming every hateful word. Nora felt her pulse hammer. She refused to let Braden hijack the narrative again. Mustering her courage, she edged closer to the mic. This crowd is filled with people who lived your so-called errors. They lost homes. Families were uprooted. That's not an isolated mishap. Braden turned on her, fury radiating. All I see are a handful of opportunists who think they can cash in on a lawsuit. If your platform was truly about helping people, you wouldn't orchestrate these stunts for media attention like landing a plane or this rally. It's all spectacle to line your own pockets. That struck a nerve. Nora's vision tinged red. Calm, she told herself. Stay calm. The entire crowd watched, riveted. She softened her voice, letting compassion edge out anger. What we did was expose the systemic wrong. We're not collecting hush money, we're forcing accountability. If you truly believe your family's innocent, open your records. Let external auditors verify every loan. Unless, of course, you're hiding something. Braden's lips thinned. For a moment, it looked like he might strike her, but instead, he regained composure. We'll see what the courts have to say, he growled. Meanwhile, I have a right to speak to these people, too. Nora relinquished the mic, stepping aside, uncertain how to proceed without fueling a bigger scene. The crowd, restless and near a tipping point, seemed ready to surge forward. A chant broke out, "Justice now, justice now." Microphones bristled in the press area, capturing the tension for broadcast. Within the maelstrom, Braden stared them down, maintaining a defiant stance that stoked even more outrage. This is going to erupt if we're not careful, Nora thought. At that critical moment, a voice boomed through a handheld speaker. "Step away from the stage. Mr. Winthrop." Heads turned to see uniformed police officers moving in, accompanied by city council representatives. The lead officer announced firmly, "We have an order from the mayor to ensure public safety. Given the crowd's agitation, we're asking all parties to stand down." Braden sneered but complied, stepping away from the mic with slow, deliberate movements. He didn't want a public brawl that might boomerang back on him. Cameras followed his every step as he descended from the stage, glaring daggers at Nora and Marcus. Once on the ground, he barked orders at his security detail, quickly retreating with his lawyers into the building's lobby. A hush of relief swept the rally. The tension eased as uniformed officers established a wide barrier between the protesters and the building's entrance. The city council reps urged calm, promising to coordinate with Clear Vista to schedule a formal hearing on predatory lending. Applause broke out, a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. Nora's shoulders sagged. She felt the aftermath settle in a wave of shakiness from confrontation, relief that it hadn't erupted into chaos. She exchanged a weary hug with Marcus. "Well," he murmured, "at least nobody got arrested this time." Tiana hopped onto the stage, microphone in hand. "Folks, we're going to wind down for now. Thank you for standing up for your rights. Keep sharing your stories on Clear Vista. Change is coming." The crowd cheered as music began playing from portable speakers, an echo of resilience rather than celebration. After stepping down, Nora made her way through the throng, shaking hands, offering reassurance to tearful homeowners. Some clung to her, sobbing about how they'd been evicted mere weeks ago. She felt their pain like a physical weight, but she also sensed an undercurrent of hope, an awakening that the corporate giants weren't invincible. By the time the plaza cleared, dusk had fallen, the city lights illuminating the Winthrop Foundation's towering facade. Nora, Marcus, and Tiana lingered near the stage, collecting cables and equipment, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Tiana exhaled. "That was intense. Think the coverage will show the truth?" Marcus glanced at the TV vans packing up. The press definitely got footage of Braden's outburst. Public sentiment was already on our side. Let him keep playing the villain role if he wants. Nora gazed at the building's tinted windows, wondering if Braden was peering down at them from behind some boardroom glass. "We're far from finished," she whispered. "Even with Walter's confession, lawsuits can drag on for years. But we have the momentum, and Clear Vista's technology will keep exposing their scams faster than they can hide them." Tiana shut her laptop case, yawning. "Then let's get some sleep, boss. We have 1,000,000 depositions to set up tomorrow." As they walked away from the foundation's grand entrance, Nora suddenly recalled how she once dreamed of quietly avenging her mother's loss. "But I never imagined it would become so big," she thought. "A plane landing, a public confession, Mass rallies. The magnitude both humbled and empowered her. At the sidewalk, they piled into Marcus's car. The city's neon glow filled the windshield, an electric tapestry that mirrored Nora's own sense of purpose. She knew more turmoil lay ahead: formal investigations, political blowback, the possibility of violent retaliation. But tonight, she felt an undeniable certainty. We changed the narrative. We shattered the illusions of untouchable wealth, and we gave ordinary people a voice, one that even the Winthrops can't silence. As the engine started, Nora closed her eyes, just for a moment, letting exhaustion and quiet triumph wash over her. Tomorrow, they would forge on, building a future where no family would endure what she once did, and that, more than private jets or corporate titles, was the legacy she truly wanted to leave behind. In the end, revenge wasn't measured by the shots fired, nor the ashes left smoldering where greed once stood. It wasn't even found in the silence of an emptied boardroom, where echoes of power lingered like ghosts. It was in the quiet moments afterward, the stillness that settled into the spaces where pain had once lived, the breaths finally drawn free of the past's grip. Yet every victory exacted its toll, a price paid in innocence lost, dreams reshaped, and a heart heavy with the cost of justice pursued at all costs. And now, standing here at the edge of a life forever changed, one truth resonates above all: true strength isn't in the force we exert over our enemies, but in the courage it takes to rebuild after the storm. Perhaps that's the hardest battle of all, facing not those who wronged us, but ourselves in the mirror each morning. So as the echoes fade and the ashes scatter, what remains is the quiet promise that somewhere beyond revenge lies something far more powerful: redemption. But the question we carry forward, whispered in the stillness, is this: after all we've done, after all we've become, can we ever truly find our way back home?